So, welcome everybody. This is the second in our series of speakers for the summer. Word about tonight's speaker. John David Pleins is a professor of religious studies at Santa Clara University. He's been there since 1987, so this year he celebrates 20 years at the institution. That also happens to be just a little longer than certain grad students that I know. Not mentioning any names. He's a biblical scholar who has done field work in Jordan and is the author of several books, including When the Great Abyss Opened, the classic and contemporary readings of Noah's Flood, The Social Visions of the Hebrew Bible, a theological introduction, and Songs of Tragedy, Hope, and Justice. All of those are available still on Amazon.com. Okay, tonight he gives us a sneak preview of his latest book, a look at creationism in the Bible, which is titled, Is God a Creationist? David Pleins.
Santa Clara people, and it's wonderful. It's nice to just get acquainted with those of you who are in the sciences and so forth, and we get a chance to talk about a question that I hope is on your minds. There's a lot that's going on in the news around these kinds of issues, and maybe in terms of your own personal life, you've wondered about these sorts of questions. I just would like to get a sense of the group. How many of you are in some aspect of science here, in sort of areas? And what kind of areas do we have? Even briefly. Engineering. How many other engineers? But then there are types, right? We're learning about graduation at Santa Clara that is it the civil engineers or the mechanical engineers? One of those groups have their own special orange helmet that they wear when they go through graduation. Can I come closer?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. How's that? I hope it's better. Okay. You just keep after me. And so apparently they had the orange helmets. You didn't know this when you were going out. And being an electrical engineer, I suggested he should have had a helmet with one of those fans that go, because at least our graduations are hotter than blazes there in Santa Clara at that time of year. So electrical, mechanical, civil, anyone not? And beyond engineering, there are science areas. Physics, yes. And anyone else? So it's just good to get a sense for the crowd. The book that I'm working on is a book that grows out of the last book that I did, which was on the different interpretations of Noah's flood. And I got caught up in the question of the debate over the Bible in the 19th century. So some of the work that I'm doing has to do with biblical interpretation and the debates over science and religion at that time. But at Santa Clara, I can't just teach a course that deals with somewhere in the 19th century. So I also do courses in biblical interpretation in relation to mythology, being one logical side of things, but also the ongoing debates over religion and science today. So I've been trying to take the perspectives I've been getting from writing about Darwin and the debates around Darwin in the 19th century and applying them for my students today in the ongoing debates. So what I'll talk about today is, in part, some of the things that have to do with my book, but in part, some of the things that I just do with my students in terms of the ongoing questions that are out there. Now, the question of the evening is God a creationist? And there's two ways to answer this question. Either I do like J.K. Rowling, in the Harry Potter crowd, and hide the answer to that question to the very last second, or I act like some of these spoilers and give away things before the book even goes on sale, which apparently you can do if you type in and go to certain websites, you can find out how book 7 ends without even having to read it, I guess. Or you can do, and this is what I want to do, what they did in the Mercury News this morning with Harry Potter. They said, you've read the first line that said, Harry Potter dies, or perhaps he doesn't. So there's different ways to answer questions like this. So is God a creationist? The obvious answer is no, maybe, and yes. Okay, so I'm going to kind of give you a little bit of J.K. Rowling and not by suggesting there are lots of different ways of answering this question. And the way I'll talk about this evening is in 3 parts. I want to think about the no, I want to think about maybe, and I want to think about yes. Maybe a little more sophisticated way, but that'll help you to keep track of where I'm going. This is an exciting time to be thinking about these questions, but it's also a very challenging time to be thinking about these questions. If you followed anything of the bestseller list lately, there are quite a few books that have gone to the top of the New York Times bestseller list that basically denounce religion in the name of modern science and philosophy and knowledge. One of the obvious titles is from Richard Dawkins, who is an evolutionary biologist at Oxford, and his book is called The God Delusion. You can't get any more clear about where that book is going in terms of the answer. And so it is a challenging time to be thinking about these questions because you are getting very prominent thinkers who are taking very strong, definite stands on these questions and insisting that the religious option is not an option and that it's a delusion. So that makes it a challenge. But I like challenges. So unlike some who might run from these sorts of questions or be unnerved by them, I think the challenge is well taken. There are some times when people give answers from a religious point of view that aren't very well thought out. And so we deserve to be thinking through more seriously these questions. On the other hand, it's kind of an exciting time. Some of it has to do more with pop culture than anything else. Have any of you seen Evan Almighty? Did you go to this movie? Okay, you got to see this movie. It's a fun film, and it's a recreation in the modern time of the old Noah's Ark story. So having written a book on Noah's Ark, I had to see the movie, of course, but I wasn't surprised to have phone calls coming from newspapers asking, I'm supposedly now the Noah's Ark man, asking what did I think of this movie and what were the ideas, what is the flood story about in the first place, and what do religion and science have to do with one another. So it's kind of an exciting time too, because unexpectedly, while you have books going to the top of the bestseller list that are anti-religion, you have this kind of popular rethinking of old religious stories like Noah's flood. And done in it, even though it's a comedy, it's done in a very serious way because they're taking on the issue of global warming. They're using that story as a way of asking, humorously, what is going on in the world? Do we have a responsibility to care for the planet? And so forth. And I was kind of amazed, actually, the director of the film bought 400 bicycles for the people who are in the cast and crew so that they would, not pollute so much. And they were planting trees to offset the carbon emissions they were creating, I guess, by flying all over the place to make the film. So it's interesting to see, at one and the same time, books like God Delusion going out. On the other hand, a film like Evan Almighty, which is asking us to rethink our biblical roots, and to rethink our values at the same time, in a clever, comedic way. So that's my entree into these questions.